We go from a race that was held in Italy but labelled a completely different country, to another race which is held in one country but labelled completely differently. Don't be fooled by the fact that it says Germany. This is in fact the European Grand Prix, round 5 of the 2015 FF1M Championship. Last time out at the inaugural race at Mugello, Fernando Alonso took his second win of the season, quite comfortably in the end after taking the lead from Sebastian Vettel on the second lap after the German went off at the Corrientau corner. He had dropped to around last place, but grittily fought back despite losing his front wing after an incident involving Cooper Lee and Jenson Button. He was up to 7th, was Vettel, before his engine blew up with just a few laps to go. That's been a bit of a theme of Shake and Bake's season so far. Fast but fragile. Vettel's only finished once out of the 4 races so far, but that one win could help him out if the car is reliable. Instead it is Fernando Alonso who leads the championship, along with Tornado, fairly comfortably, but there is still a very long way to go. There's a map of the Nurburgring circuit. We're using the pre-2002 variants with the more quicker and more interesting Castrol S first couple of corners. Vettel did win the last 2 races here at the Nurburgring in 2013 and 2014, but he's got it all to do, especially on the reliability front. We're expecting 2 stops all round, same as in Mugello. In the practice sessions there's a bit of a theme emerging, in that Sebastian Vettel and Väinö Kymmänen are topping each session, but we have a brand new pole sitter for this race, Thomas Gonzalez, first career pole position ahead of teammate Fernando Alonso. The gap was pretty small between the two, and it's an all Mitchell row too, who have had a very, very difficult season so far, mostly thanks to bad luck and bad finishing. They're not managing it. Daniel Ricciardo, the Australian Grand Prix race winner, is 5th on the grid ahead of Brazilian Grand Prix race winner Sebastian Vettel. Then Kimi Raikkonen starts 7th ahead of the perennially unlucky Lewis Hamilton, who was caught up in Massa's incident early in that race. Speaking of which, Massa starts 9th on the grid ahead of Nico Rosberg in the Willows. Willows scored their first points last time out at Mugello, courtesy of 11th on the grid Stoffel Vandoorne taking a superb podium finish, despite falling to last on lap 2. Bottas will start 12th, he was 2nd last time out at Mugello. Antonio Felix da Costa and Romain Grosjean will start row 7, Grosjean's still looking for his first finish of the season. Perez and Button will be on row number 8, and then we've got Kevin Magnussen starting in 17th position, quite familiar starting place for him. Isuki Yoshida will start 18th on the grid, and then Charles Pic takes 19th ahead of Carlos Sainz in 20th. Carlos had a very good race last time out, not qualifying well, but the Mugen engine is very good in the race, and that's what's helping the GRM team. Also on Mugens is the team on the back row, Jean-Eric Verne and Robert Kubica. It's like Australia all over again for the Brazilian team. There's a good view of the Dunlop car. Nice carousel style corner. So, 5 lights are on, Thomas Gonzalez on his first ever pole position, and the 5 lights go out, and Thomas Gonzalez has gotten a pretty decent start. Alonso's gotten away well as well. What is going to happen into the first corner? We do see some incidents. Vettel's looking a bit racy up the inside, and taking the lead after a superb outbraking manoeuvre is Sebastian Vettel. He means business already. Alonso is 2nd, Gonzalez 3rd, and at the back is Carlos Sainz. And what else have we got? Cooper Lee hanging on to 4th position. Hulkenberg's had a poor start. He's down to 6th. Kimi Raikkonen's had a good start up to 5th position. And then completing the top 8 are Daniel Ricciardo and Nico Rosberg. Rosberg up 2 positions. And I saw some movement between Hamilton and Vandoorne. And it's in fact Massa moving ahead of Vandoorne for 10th position. So Massa having lost an overall position, making it back up. Now what we got into the bit curve, or something like that, I think it's the RTL and bit curve we're looking at, as we are looking at Nico Rosberg, who is looking at Daniel Ricciardo's 7th position. Now, are Willows running higher engine motor for this race? I suspect they did at Mugello. We'll never know. Nearly contact between Hulkenberg and Ricciardo as they saunter their way through the chicane. There's contact between the Pedersens. There's more drivers involved as well. Magnussen's had a poor start. He's down from 17th to 21st. Pick's had a decent start up to 16th. But it is Sebastian Vettel who leads the race so far, looking for 3 in a row at the Nurburgring. And the top 5 breaking away a little bit as Bottas has a look at Stoffel Vandoorne for 11th position. And further back, Charles Pic, remaining in 16th, is in a Pedersen sandwich at the moment. Pedersen's so far having been very unreliable. Grosjean yet to finish, and Perez's only points was that 2nd position at the first race of the season in Australia. On board with Vettel through the Schumacher S, named after the multiple world champion. It was 1996 and 1998 in the FF1M World. Cooper Lee's defending from Kimi Raikkonen. Ricciardo's doing something similar on Nico Rosberg in 7th position. And Ricciardo did score a point last time out at Mugello despite getting into a lot of contact with Charles Pic at the Arrabbiata corners. Ricciardo getting away with just side pod damage. Pic needed a new front wing. I think Raikkonen was having a look at Cooper Lee, but it didn't work out, and now he's under pressure from the other Mitchell. As Vettel sets another new fastest lap, well, it's only lap 2, but he is pulling away from Alonso a little bit. As Hulkenberg is now having a look at Kimi Raikkonen going into the first corner. Hulkenberg on soft tyres, and I think Cooper Lee is on soft tyres as well. Rosberg ahead of Ricciardo, so that's a position gain for the 2006 FF1M champion. As Hulkenberg harries Kimi Raikkonen. Down the hill towards the Dunlop Care. Is Hulkenberg going to make some sort of move? He's swarming about over the Meister gearbox. Meister's home race, actually. They are a German team. And so far, for Kimi Raikkonen, it's not going too badly. Up 2 positions from his grid slots. Here's Roman Grosjean versus Kubica. That's Grosjean having a bad exit out of the Dunlop Care. So here, on board with Vettel, starting 6th on the grid, gets a very, very good start. And he's already ahead of Ricciardo, already ahead of Hulkenberg, and there's a big gap opening up on the inside, and he takes that gap, outbrakes the lot of them into the lead. Great start from the current world champion. And no incidents at the Castrol S either, so they're all very well behaved. Now this is the 2 Gajiras going into combat, nearly 3 wide going into the Dunlop Care, and Kubica takes both Verne, and is that Grosjean? It is Roman Grosjean. So that's where Grosjean's bad exit happened. So this is Hulkenberg versus Raikkonen now, going into the... I called it the Vidal chicane, but it then became the NGK chicane, and he's a bit sluggish going through there. And Hamilton having a look at Ricciardo, but Massa is lurking on the pair of them. Now, is Rosberg going to do something about Hulkenberg as another new fastest lap for Vettel? But he's not exactly pulling away from the 2 Tornadoes. The gap between the 3, just 2 seconds, 1.8 to be pedantic. Hamilton trying to outbrake Ricciardo, and as Hamilton had a nudge from behind from Massa, and well, they've all got away with it, but let's see an onboard from Massa as Hamilton has another look up the nearly up the inside going into the Ford complex. Yoshida's dropping back, he's down to 21st, so there's been an incident there somewhere. As Hamilton continues to have a look at Ricciardo, locking up the brakes from somebody. Off goes Ricciardo, so spin, and into the path of the GRM, out of the race goes Daniel Ricciardo, and Bottas needs a new front wing. Yoshida is out of the race, it's a gearbox problem for the Japanese driver, and that's a crash for Daniel Ricciardo. So, I think he does lock up, does Ricciardo, and then wide, and then tries to hang on, but gets a bit too greedy on the accelerator pedal, and poor Bottas had nowhere to go. So the Flying Finn 3 needs a new front wing. Is Nico Rosberg. Up the inside now, finally, of Nico Hulkenberg, and that is 6th position for the German. German on German, but Rosberg has a finished ad. And Raikkonen is closing up to Cooper Lee. Off goes a Pedersen. Is that Grosjean? Or is it Perez? I think it's Perez, looking at the pink on the helmet. Indeed, it is Sergio Perez out of the race with another gearbox issue, or it could be drive shaft. Into the pits comes Robert Kubica with an electrical issue, and at the same time as Valtteri Bottas, so it's all kicking off on the 4th and 5th laps. Now Rosberg's up the back of Raikkonen. This is a 3-way battle for 4th position. Lee is proving a bit of a roadblock, and that is the parked Pedersen on the outside of the Castrol S gravel trap, yellow flags. But yes, Lee's definitely slow at this point, and he's holding up. It is in fact a 4-way battle for 4th position. Lee, Raikkonen, Rosberg and Hulkenberg in the mix as well. Into the Dunlop hairpin comes Lee, just about hanging on. Lee got his first points in Brazil, and then crashed out at Mugello, having spun at one of the chicanes, right into the path of Jenson Button in the Exolite. Speaking of which, he's down in 15th. Lee defending very aggressively from Raikkonen going into the RTL and bit curves. And there you can see Hulkenberg lurking in the background as well. Now, there's always action going into the Vidal NGK chicane. Is something going to happen? Raikkonen is having a look at the inside now, and that is a position gain for Kimi Raikkonen. Lee keeps it on track, but he has lost a position. Now he's got to defend from Nico Rosberg. So it's the Meister driver who gains a position. Now we have a look at the Willows, looking for more points after their impressive haul in Mugello, despite Rosberg retiring very early on. Now at the inside of Lee into the Castrol S. And is there going to be contact? Nope, no contact. And Lee hanging on around the outside. Now Hulkenberg's having a look at Rosberg. And meanwhile, Rosberg's teammate is up into 8th position. So we have got both Willows in the points. In fact, Van Dorn has overtaken quite a few cars. He's passed Massa and Hamilton. So once again, there's pace in the Willows. As Rosberg is in a Mitchell sandwich going through the Dunlop Care. Vettel leads by 1.1 seconds from Alonso, and in a further 1.2 back is Thomas Gonzalez. So the top three are staying very close together. Now that Raikkonen has got past Lee, can he do anything about the top three? I doubt it, because the manufacturer teams, which Vettel, Alonso and Gonzalez are a part of, have access to higher engine modes, and we've seen that the Meister, whilst it's a good qualifying car, in all that thought as Rosberg tags the back of Lee, locks his front brakes, but they get away with it. Raikkonen doesn't have access to high engine modes, and the Meister has proven to be a good qualifying car, not quite so quick in the race. The opposite is true of the GRMs and the Gajeras to a certain extent. Now up the inside into Castrol S this time, but back out. Oh, Cooper Lee has spun it! He's locked up and spun round. That's a big mistake from the Australian. Now he should be able to get it going again, but he's not doing so far. So that moves Rosberg up a position to 5th, and meanwhile we've got Grosjean versus Pic for 12th position. This is an all-French battle, and lurking up to these two are Jenson Button and Carlos Sainz. Just ahead of Pic is Jean-Eric Vergne as well. Now it looks like Romain Grosjean is going to try and make a move on Charles Pic, the FJR driver, who's not done too badly actually. He's moved up from 19th up to 12th so far in the race. But he is under pressure, and I do happen to know that FJR aren't running the higher engine modes in the race. They're looking for some reliability, but Romain Grosjean is looking for 12th position. He's not quite got it yet. But Rosberg is now looking for 4th position, so it is Rosberg on the move. Raikkonen definitely isn't catching up to the top three. In fact, he's 17 odd seconds behind. But it is Rosberg now ahead of Raikkonen in 4th position. So now can Nico Rosberg do something about the top three? Again, I doubt it, but it'd be interesting to see him try. So the gap between the top three is still quite close. In fact, Alonso is closing in on Vettel as this first stint is coming to a conclusion. 2 stops expected all around. And here's Vettel, with Alonso lurking up to the shake and bake gearbox. Gap is just 7/10 as they started this lap. Alonso is in fact due in the pits this lap, so as soon as he's caught up to Vettel, he's going to make the move into the pits. So Alonso the first one to blink, looking for his 3rd win of the season, Vettel looking for his 2nd, and Gonzalez looking for his 1st win of the season. In fact, Gonzalez is still looking for his 1st ever podium. He was running 3rd in Mugello before suffering a very unfortunate transmission issue, a gearbox problem, but a new steering wheel fixed it, and in fact he set the fastest lap on brand new tyres. But he did lose 3rd position. Finished 5th in the end, so it was still some useful points for the Tornado team. Out of the pits comes Alonso. He's rejoined 5th, and there's some nice clear track ahead of him. Rosberg is also into the pits, so that's why he's dropping down the order for now, but he'll regain all of those positions once the drivers ahead of him make their first stops. Vettel is into the pits this lap, so he's reacting pretty much immediately to Alonso's pit stop as Jean-Eric Vergne comes into the pits. He was running in 11th position ahead of Charles Pic. He did in fact start 21st, so that's not been a bad drive for Verne so far. Into the pits comes Sebastian Vettel from the race lead. So, is Gonzalez going to follow him in, or is Gonzalez going to take the lead of the race very briefly? Slowing down to 81 kilometres an hour, around 50 miles an hour. Into the box comes Vettel. New hard tyres going on as Gonzalez continues round to take the lead, but due in the pits very soon. 4.8 seconds is the stop for Vettel. Now, let's see further back. Keep an eye out for Alonso. There's Raikkonen. There's Hulkenberg going through. And out of the pits, still ahead of Alonso, is Sebastian Vettel. So it's worked out very well for the shake and bake driver. Taking on quite a bit of fuel for this middle stint. So I suspect he's going to come in about lap 46. So long middle stint, fresh tyres at the end. That's the plan for Vettel. And what's the plan for Alonso? Let's take a look at him. But we have a look at Hulkenberg coming into the pits, following right behind Raikkonen. Now, this does favour Hulkenberg. If he can get a good stop in, he can prevent Raikkonen from exiting the pits in front. As Lewis Hamilton comes into the pits as well. And he's jumped Kimi Raikkonen. Nico Hulkenberg gains a position at the expense of the Meister driver. And there's Rosberg coming out just about... it's a Pedersen, in fact. Grosjean ahead of Kimi Raikkonen, where Rosberg's a long way clear. So what was I talking about? As Gonzalez comes into the pits, some 3 laps after Fernando Alonso. And you can see the yellow banded medium tyres. Old tyres come off, new tyres come on. And it's a slower stop for Gonzalez, a much slower stop, 7.2 seconds. So he's lost 2.4 seconds compared to Sebastian Vettel. Out of the pits comes Gonzalez. Excuse me. And taking on a decent slug of fuel as well. 25 laps more. Take him to lap 48. There is Alonso in second position. Gonzalez maintains third as Felipe Massa comes in from fourth position. This is Massa versus Hamilton and Van Dorn for 8th position. Hamilton looks the quicker driver so far, but it's taken a very unusual line. That's an optimistic one, going on the inside into Dunlop. Luckily for Massa, Hamilton backed out of that one at the last moment. But for now, Hamilton looks the quicker driver. So the gap between Vettel and Alonso is 1.6 seconds, and Gonzalez is 4.9 behind Vettel. Gonzalez is on the fresher tyres, so he should theoretically catch up to the front two, as Hamilton is catching up to Massa going through Hatzenbach-Bogen. And now into the Vidal NGK chicane. Hamilton outbrakes Massa up the inside, and that's a position gain for the Exolite driver. Exolite looking for some more points after their 4th place in Australia. They haven't had much of it since. But at the moment, Hamilton is in the 8th position, and Massa and Bottas is in the pits from 8th or so position. That would be his first stop, so a first scheduled stop, because he came into the pits with a broken front wing very early on in the race. So Bottas's quest for points looking a bit tricky. As we ride on board with Stoffel Van Dorn in 9th position, chasing 8th place Massa. So Bottas's pit stop has moved Hamilton up to 7th now. Not pulling away immediately from Massa, but steadily. And can Hamilton do anything about Raikkonen? There's a 10-second gap between the two. Vettel starts lap 25. Gonzalez is catching the pair of them slightly and steadily, but it was 0.3 quicker on that lap. Now through the bit curve goes Van Dorn. This will give us an indication as to whether Willows are running higher engine modes for this race, but there's some good traction for that Meister coming out of the bit curve. And you can see the Willows not exactly catching up, as out of the race goes Jenson Button, pulling off in the gravel trap, and, well, he's sort of humping the gravel trap. That's another transmission issue, so gearbox or drive shaft, take your pick. And lap 27, Gonzalez on. Oh, Vettel is pulling off out of the race! So there goes a league battle between Vettel and Alonso. So once again, Shake and Bake's proving quick but unreliable. But it looks limping, so that's a suspension or a puncture. So that moves Fernando Alonso into the lead. The gap between himself and Gonzalez just 1.3 seconds now. Gonzalez looking quick, and it's confirmed to be a puncture for Vettel, so that is unlucky. That moves Rosberg up to 3rd position. That moves Raikkonen up to 4th, Hulkenberg 5th, Hamilton 6th, then Massa and Van Dorn completing the top 8. Here are the two GRMs battling for 11th and 12th position, and they're not far behind Romain Grosjean either. Grosjean, where did he start? He started 14th, and Bottas 12th on the grid. Carlos Sainz 20th. So Sainz ahead of Bottas, but that's probably down to the fact that Bottas has already had 2 stops and has another one to make. Through the Schumacher S they go. Now is Bottas going to have a look at Sainz? Not quite going into there, but there's a good opportunity coming out of the bit curve onto the back straight, through the Hatzenbach-Boden kink, and then into the Vidal NGK chicane. Here's the slipstream. Is Bottas going to dive up the inside? Sainz trying to defend it, and contact between the two, but they both get away with it, and Bottas taking a clumsy line through the second apex. So, here are the two tornadoes now, just 7/10 apart. Lap 42, Alonso leads from Gonzalez. But are there any team orders? As Gonzalez is having a look up to the forward curve, there's another contact between the two, and Gonzalez very aggressively takes the lead of the race from Alonso. Let's have another look at that and see if there was in fact contact. I think there was. Here's a replay on board with Gonzalez. So he gets a very good run out of Castrol. No, Alonso made a mistake. He locked his brakes up, and Gonzalez took the opportunity to take the lead of the race. So it was clean in the end. Gonzalez leads. Now here are the two FJRs battling for 13th position. Pick v Magnussen going into the Dunlop care, and careful, I'm watching you two. Good boys. Magnussen takes 13th place from Charles Pic, who got a bad exit out of the Dunlop care, and now he's under pressure from Robert Kubica. Pic going to try and play wingman for Magnussen, even though it's very unlikely that both will score points, but both are running reliably. FJRs have been quite reliable this season, as have the two Tornadoes. Tornadoes yet to retire from a race, yet. And in fact, they're coming up to lap this trio of Magnussen, Pic and Kubica. And Magnussen pulling away slightly. Now let's see further back. Hamilton, is he in the pits or has he got an issue? Because he's dropped back a bit. As Robert Kubica is definitely running higher engine modes. Or the Mugen is just that much better than the Judd. But Pic is that much braver on the brakes as he hangs on to 14th position. But now Kubica up the inside going into the Ford complex, but not quite managing it. Pic is very aggressive so far, and it's helping Magnussen keep away from the Gajera driver. Now Kubica is being lapped by Thomas Gonzalez. But not just yet, as he concentrates on Charlotte Plectrum, as I christened Pic in the last race. Through the Schumacher S, is Kubica going to have a go going into the RTL and bit curves? He's having a think up the inside, but thinks better of it as he tucks back into the dirty air of Pic, now through the bit curve. Now he's going to have to back off now because Gonzalez is now ahead of him. There's the blue flags. That's cost Kubica an opportunity to get ahead of Pic, but Pic, of course, has to be lapped by this driver here, Thomas Gonzalez. But Gonzalez is in fact going to make his second pit stop of the race, as is Kevin Magnussen, right in front of the Argentine driver. So, now, can Alonso utilise some relatively clear air and low fuel to try and get ahead of Gonzalez? Because we saw Alonso pit first in the first round of stops, but Vettel still rejoined ahead of the Spaniard. So it looks as if the tyres and fuel are very even, as Gonzalez is being delayed. That was a delayed. And who was that in front of Gonzalez? Was that Kubica making a pit stop as well? I think it was, because Magnussen's still ahead of Kubica. So that must mean Kubica was still in the pits. So now, this is a golden opportunity for Fernando Alonso, who now is in the pits. The lap after Gonzalez. Now Alonso has got... No, yes it is Alonso. He's got Pic making a pit stop right in front of him. But Alonso... Now, this could be interesting because the FJR garage is first out of these two. Pick might get out ahead of Alonso. Let's see the delay. Not much of a delay actually, but it's 6.6 seconds stop. So it's going to be very close between Alonso and Gonzalez as Rosberg comes into the pits. Where is Gonzalez? We're still on board with Alonso. Through the Castrol S. I think he's still in the lead from Gonzalez. There is Gonzalez, right behind Alonso. Now Gonzalez needs to attack now if he's going to take his first ever win. Hulkenberg comes into the pits for his second stop from 4th position, but he'll lose that to whoever on earth will be 4th in the end. That's a very eloquent way of putting it. Now then, Gonzalez is right at the back of Alonso as we're going to go through the Schumacher S. There's Kubica and Pick going side by side. Alonso missing the apex. He thought he was actually in the Eiffel Mountains or the Nordschleife even. But Alonso under some serious pressure through the pit curve. Gonzalez is in the slipstream, but there's a conundrum. There are 2 battling cars in front of these two. Just creeping up to him, and Gonzalez up the inside. There's contact between the two. There's nibbling on the back of the Alonso rear wing, but they both get away with it. They can afford to. They're so far ahead of the competition, but they don't want to take each other out. It has happened in FF1M before. The 2 GE racings collided spectacularly at Hockenheim during the 2008 season. Much to my astonishment, they were running 2nd and 3rd at the time, because I think Alonso for FJR was leading that race so far. The 2 GE racing drivers in question were Robert Kubica and Christian Klien. So Alonso's got a slightly more comfortable buffer over his very young and very inexperienced but very quick teammate of Thomas Gonzalez. Now we have a look at Nico Hulkenberg versus Kimi Raikkonen. This is for 4th position. And going into the RTL curve, not quite there. And then going into the bit curve, well, it's obviously not an overtaking opportunity, but coming out of it, onto the back straight, there's a big overtaking opportunity into the Vedal. He's going early, and that was not recommended, and as a result, he's a bit too far back to have a proper go at Kimi Raikkonen into the chicane. So Raikkonen hangs on for at least another few corners. Meanwhile, we have got Hamilton in 6th position ahead of Massa in 7th and Van Dorn in 8th. So those positions they're pretty consistent with how the race has gone so far. In the background you can see Lewis Hamilton. He's not too far behind these two. So if these two start battling ferociously, we could be seeing a 3-way battle for 4th position. And it's looking less likely that it's going to be a battle for the lead, because Alonso has now extended the gap to 1.8 seconds between himself and Thomas Gonzalez. Nico Rosberg is up in 3rd position very comfortably as Hulkenberg makes contact with Raikkonen and spins. Now then, can he rejoin? Well, it's a messy rejoin. And there goes Hamilton up into 5th position. I think Raikkonen has got away with it, but Hulkenberg definitely has not. He's dropped down to 6th position. And, oh, Van Dorn out! Van Dorn slowing down, and he's pulling off. That's unfortunate for the Belgian. Running in 8th position, so it's now going seemingly to Jean-Eric Vergne. The final point. So that's a bit heartbreaking for the Willows driver, especially after his brilliant drive at Mugello to 3rd position. And you can just see a glimpse of the 2 tornadoes going through to start 4 laps to go. And you can see another transmission issue. Now then, there is a battle for 5th position, undecided, because Hulkenberg on the soft tyres looks quick. Is he going to do something about Lewis Hamilton? Through the bit curve they go. Can Hulkenberg get a good slipstream coming out of the bit curve? That looks pretty good, actually. Now through the kink. And in the slipstream, is Hulkenberg going to have a dive bomb at the inside? He's trying to, but Hamilton moves across and hangs on to 5th position at the moment. 2 very different drivers, 2 very different teams, 2 very different engines, and 2 different compounds of tyre. And at this moment, they are separated by just 0.2 of a second. Now Hulkenberg has got a decent run going into the Castrol S. Hamilton not defending it this time, but braking very late and hanging on to 5th position so far. This is helping Kimi Raikkonen stay ahead of these two. Meanwhile, further back, Massa in 7th and Jean-Eric Vergne in 8th. Quite lonely compared to these two. And looking at the rest of the order, we have got Bottas in 9th, Grosjean in 10th, Sainz 11th, Magnussen 12th, Kubica 13th, Charles Pic 14th, and then the last of the runners so far, Antonio Felix da Costa. We've not heard anything from him at all in this race, but he's in 15th, still running, but in last. Alonso begins his penultimate lap of the race, 2 seconds ahead of Thomas Gonzalez. 16 seconds from Alonso is Nico Rosberg in 3rd position, Raikkonen 4th, and then this undecided battle for 5th position is Hamilton. He's moving a bit to the middle. Hulkenberg has outbraked him this time, but Hamilton hanging on round the outside. They're side by side going into the final corner now. Who is going to take 5th position? They're side by side, still side by side. None of them are going to give up as they start their penultimate lap. Hamilton is now on the inside, but as we've seen, the outside line isn't too bad going into the first Castrol S. As you can see there, Hulkenberg, braver on the brakes, up into 5th position. Hamilton down to 6th, but looking good for points if the X-Light can hang on. And here is Fernando Alonso exiting the final corner to start his final lap of the race. And it's been a different kind of win compared to his last one at Mugello. He was very comfortable in the lead. Here it was a slightly trickier battle between himself, Thomas Gonzalez and Sebastian Vettel. But Vettel's car let him down, or rather Vettel's tyre let him down, and Alonso utilised Thomas Gonzalez's slow pit stop to regain the lead of the race. Gonzalez didn't seem too happy about that, so he tried to shave a bit of the Tornado rear wing off of Alonso. And I think when that happened, I heard the distinct sound of Tobias having a kitten in fear. But both his cars are still running, 1 and 2, and that will do their championship chances no harm whatsoever. Just a few more corners to go. There goes Alonso, there goes Gonzalez. Through the kink, just 3 more corners to go, which includes this heavy braking zone of the Vidal NGK chicane. There's 2 apexes. There's the pit lane entrance to Alonso's right as he goes into the final corner one last time. And out of the final corner to take his 3rd win of the season is Fernando Alonso for Tornado. Thomas Gonzalez comes home to take his first ever podium finish. So a great result for Tornado, 1-2. And give it a moment and we shall see Nico Rosberg coming home to take Willows' 2nd consecutive podium finish and Rosberg's first points of the season as well, because he's had a bit of a mare. There's confirmation of Alonso's, I think it's his 27th career win now, because the 26th was a previous graphic. Thomas Gonzalez takes his first podium in 2nd ahead of Nico Rosberg in the Willows. So a good return to form for the German. And an all-manufacturer top 3 as well. Kimi Raikkonen takes 4th, the first of the customer teams, ahead of Nico Hulkenberg, so Hulkenberg gets his 2nd points of the season, ahead of Lewis Hamilton, more points for Exolite. Felipe Massa and Jean-Eric Vergne complete the point scorers, the top 8. In fact, Vergne was only 6/10 ahead of Valtteri Bottas, so it wasn't a comfortable point for Jean-Eric Vergne, because Bottas was flying. Romain Grosjean gets a finish at last. Although not in the points, it is still 10th. And you can see the rest of the remaining runners. Kevin Magnussen, Robert Kubica, Charles Pic and Antonio Felix da Costa. No points for FJR, but they seem reliable. And you can see the list of retirements. Both shake and bakes, that's not going to do their development any good at all. Jenson Button, Cooper Lee, Sergio Perez and Daniel Ricciardo, so that mistake from Cooper Lee proved terminal for his race. And there's a look at the Drivers' Championship. Fernando Alonso looking very, very comfortable. He's got more than double that of Daniel Ricciardo. Thomas Gonzalez moves up to 3rd thanks to his 2nd place. He's now ahead of Felipe Massa and Kimi Raikkonen, so both Meisters in the top 5. Not too bad. Shake and Bake's Sebastian Vettel is down in 6th, and in completing the top 10 are Valtteri Bottas, Jean-Eric Vergne, Sergio Perez and Lewis Hamilton. And the Constructors' Championship, Tornado have exactly double that of Meister's total, 62 compared to 31. Andrew Racing hold 3rd ahead of Gajera, GRM 5th, and then Willows leap up to 6th thanks to Rosberg's podium. And then Shake and Bake down in 7th despite Vettel's win in Brazil. And completing the runners, and separated by just a single point are Pedersen, Exelite, Mitchell, and in last, FJR. So that was the European Grand Prix round number 5. Naturally, we will go to round number 6, and it takes place at the Estoril circuit in Portugal. So we shall see you then.